Budget Committee to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Hollers.
Present.
Osselson.
Here.
Joe. Here. Lester.
Here.
Michael.
Here.
Neely.
Here.
Schwartz.
Here.
Spencer.
Here.
Spicer.
Here.
Young. We have a quorum.
Derek, anything you got?
I'm quiet today.
Okay. I think you're the only one here from the public. Before we get into the amendments, I just want to thank everyone. My hope is to vote out the budget tonight. I hope that the new process with the pretty much half new council worked for everybody. I think it was a good change. I appreciate staff and all the hard work. I've worked on budgets a long time, and they're tough, and they're going to get tougher. And so this job's not going to be any easier for any of us moving forward. So I appreciate everybody's help, everybody being here on time, everybody participating. We have 2 amendments that we're going to dispose of tonight. After that, it's my intention to open it up for any last discussion and then vote the budget out. Does anybody have any issue with that order of business? Seeing none, we will move to committee members and amendments, and we have 2. I'm going to call on the Mayor Pro Tem to go first. Councilman Lester.
Okay, so I think you all have my amendment before you, and it's to fund the employee benefit tuition expense at approved educational institution for coursework relevant to the employee's area of employment with the city if approved by the department director, and I'd like to add to that and the city administrator, which is the current process. They both approve those. I think we're in a period where we struggle to recruit employees and to retain employees, and this is currently a benefit tuition reimbursement. Certainly for some employees it's very valuable, and I think it should be retained. I'm proposing that the money to fund tuition reimbursements that are in the budget come from chemicals from Public Works mainly. And doing that in Public Works, the chemicals budget is $295,000. This go round in the budget last year is about $160,000 used. The way this works is we do it smartly. The Public Works purchases salt for the roads in the off season when it's can get a better rate for it, and they replenish our stocks, and so we're all stocked up for the coming winter. And then really in our budget is to replenish whatever's used, and if we use it all, of course, to do that. So anyway, we're currently stocked up for the winter, and I think what this would do, instead of having $130,000 more than we budgeted last year, it'd be like $100,000 more in that budget. And so I think we can accommodate that. $2,000 related to tuition reimbursement for airport. And in their budget, they had $10,000 in there. Last year they used around $5,000, and so this taking $2,000 would bring that down to $8,000, which is $3,000 more than last year was used. So anyway, that's my amendment to the budget to fund the tuition reimbursements.
Any discussion on the amendment? Councilman.
President Lester, this may be for Matt too. So this budget, but what time of the year do we usually purchase it? I didn't hear at the time. Usually we'll do it when it's, you know, cheaper to, but is that a springtime, summertime, or before it all? And I can defer to Matt too if you want.
Yeah, once the winter gets going, we see where we're at, we start purchasing salt as needed. Hopefully, we have leftover monies, and by springtime, then we'd fill back up on our current contract at that time. If we don't, we would, in the past, typically come back and ask for a supplemental to backfeed that, because you don't really know how much salt you're going to use, so this is always a guesstimate.
But it's been generally in the springtime after our season's gone and we know what we've used and all that?
Correct.
Has that been a problem in the past?
Never been a problem in the past.
Is that bought here in the state of Missouri, or where does that generally come out of, do you know?
I think it's, I want to say Oklahoma was the last we had, I think.
Only there, Kansas.
There's only a couple places, actually. Kansas has one, so they're big mines.
Thank you.
Councilman Haas.
So say we have a horrific winter and we wind up using most or all of our salt stock. Is $100,000 enough to replenish and get us on the right track for next year?
No, I mean, you can have a winter where you're going to use every bit of that and more. I mean, it just depends what happens with the weather. So, I mean, there's been winters we've had to come back midwinter and get a chunk of money so that we can continue to buy salt. We'll do it under emergency purchase normally, but then follow it up with a council action. I think there's been winters we've done it twice, actually.
And we already have an emergency budget line item for that, right?
Well, the emergency line item's your fund balance. It's out of fund balance is where it goes.
And just to clarify, this would leave roughly $240,000 in that line item.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard you say 130,000 to.
Where it's 100,000 more than was used last year.
Okay, very good.
Councilwoman Joe.
Do you have any words of advice for if that would be appropriate or not?
The council's always taken that number as obviously one of the big numbers in the budget. And so the council or the city administrator or whomever, they set the number, and the mayor at the time. I mean, it's a guesstimate, really. I mean, so we try to fill up, and that would be another full filling of our bins on a typical price. I can't remember unless somebody in finance remembers if we've actually, I think we've already got the bid for next year, and it wasn't horrible is what I recall, but I don't, am I right about that? I can't remember. I think we have.
Yeah.
I think we did. And it didn't go up astronomically. I mean, some years there's big fluctuations. Depends if there's big winters, that's usually not just us, it's everywhere. So I think the salt's pretty good because we've had pretty mild winter around this area.
Councilman Spencer.
So I don't know if you've answered this question, but so if we need more material in the heat of winter, kind of an oxymoron, I guess. Purchasing in the winter, is there a higher fluctuation in cost?
We have a contract.
And
We have a contracted
so
price.
it's a contracted price year round, not just.
Well, I don't recall them ever, if we have a certain amount we can buy at a contracted price, I don't recall them making us buy all of it ever, or if we run over, we'll call and say, hey, we're gonna run over, we need more in our contract amount. I don't recall that they've ever balked at that.
I guess my concern with this is we're taking it away from a department that needs critical funding as far as we have a lease program for equipment and trucks that we're looking at, and if we had any fluctuation in funds, I'd rather fund that than this educational reimbursement, just based on a priority. Nothing more, nothing less. So I'm not comfortable with basically taking away from a critical service industry that we have. That, again, public safety relies on our public works staff to be the frontline staff to clear the roads so that our 911 staff can respond to emergencies during the winter. So I'm just not comfortable at this time. I'd be willing to look at that at the next year's budget, though.
Councilman Eilers.
I know Councilman Lester and I have talked about this a little bit, and you know, I thought that may be a place to look at certain numbers if it panned out. But also, I looked at the financial report, and my apologies for having it written in twice in my phone this morning because I thought we were meeting again at noon. But our sales taxes are down for the last 2 months. That makes me really nervous. We still got a possible big supplement coming in on our health insurance costs we don't know about, that we would have to pool together funds. And then the fleet leasing agreement that we had with Enterprises, while it has been good to us for years, is starting to even out. Maybe the market for it is not as good as us, that we were dang near get more of our money back when we traded in on that. And then some major equipment purchases we might have to make, and I've just taken all that into effect, and I'll go back to that big health insurance thing we don't know about yet, Councilman Lester, and I would love to do it. I know we've talked about a couple other things. Maybe I would prefer to look at that after the first of the year and work on that in the following budget. Because I think we also looked at talking about maybe a city planner, that an idea I ran past you about maybe a cooperative project, just thinking outside the box. So I'm probably going to vote no on this proposal, taking all that into effect, because I really just don't want to commit to something without the unknown what's coming up next.
Councilman Lester.
So I understand what you're saying. I understand there's always a risk we may have an unusually cold and wet winter. But the last 2 years, actually, last year what we spent it out of it was $160,000, and before that 130-something thousand. Our winters have been getting milder. Now yes, it could be an unusual winter. Like I said, what I'm asking for is around $30,000 to keep in place a benefit that we currently have for our employees that I think is important, and they see it as important. And we're in a competitive market, with the state and with the county and with other entities to keep our employees. So yes, it's a trade-off. You just have to evaluate what you feel is most valuable. If I can the $100,000 more that we're putting toward this year than we spent last year, if I didn't think that wasn't enough, I certainly wouldn't be going for this, but I think it is.
Councilwoman Joe.
So, being that the tuition assistance is a little different than it was, where now it's written out that it would have to be relevant to the field and then go through some levels of approval, in the event that they do not use the full amount for the tuition reimbursement, what happens to that money?
I think it would just lapse back into the general fund at that point.
So potentially it could still be there if no one took advantage of it.
It would certainly still be there if no one took it.
Yeah.
But it would be not used until the next fiscal year, unless, we have a supplement on we know we're going to have a supplement on healthcare. And so we're going to try to pool all the resources we can to pay for that. So we're going to need money, but we're kind of betting on the come here. So it won't disappear, but it won't be used on anything else. Okay. Councilman Spencer.
Just thinking out loud here. When does the spring semester start for most universities? Does anybody have an idea?
January.
In January. So kind of in the midst of winter. Okay. I thought maybe if we could, kind of a wait and see approach to see what kind of winter we had, and then maybe fund it for half the year for the spring semester. But sounds like that's not going to be an option. So.
Councilman Foster.
My meet in the middle concession would be, why don't we have funded, put 10 grand in it? That way the SALT program isn't at any significant cost against it. The new process appears to be very selective and very specific. I can't imagine there'd be very many takers, but it's available for those that need it for professional development. I think 10 grand is a great concession for, at least keeping the program alive and available and relevant for those that absolutely need it to progress within the city and to better serve our constituents.
Councilman Wheelie.
Thank you. I guess where I'm at is going back and echoing some comments of Councilman Lester. We have budgeted for this fiscal year $100,000 in addition to what we budgeted last fiscal year.
What we used.
What we used last fiscal year. And that is a very substantial gap, a gap that I think could be lessened and still be a very appropriate gap to cover any abnormality in an extreme winter. To Councilman Hazelton's point, I think the number's around 30,000, so half of 30 would be more like 15, and that, of course, would be between you and the budget or the amendment sponsor. But certainly like compromise. I think that would also make that fund a little bit more competitive too, in the sense that we've had double usage of the fund. 30,000, we mark it to 15, and it would just be the first employees with $15,000 worth of approved credit hour reimbursement that would receive it, and then it would be off the table.
Is there one then you called me.
Councilman Eilish for the third time.
Thank you, Councilman Schwartz. Is there a department that uses more of the tuition assistance than, do we have one department or the other that has to really use it a lot more for their jobs than?
So on the budget amendment, there's a listing of exactly what the breakdown is. So you can see kind of how that $30,000 is broken down. There are definitely differences between departments as far as the amount of money that they receive. I do want to make a point to Councilman Mealy's statement as far as putting it in for half, and it's essentially a first come, first serve. That is not currently how we do it. Each of the departments has a specific dollar amount. So I just want to call attention to that. This would be a discretion from what we've done in the past. But obviously council's prerogative, we just need instructions on how to accomplish that.
And just kind of say that my understanding is that in creating the budget and the amounts by department, that was based on what department's input was as far as individual employees that had submitted that they needed to do this or wanted to have this.
In some instances, I believe that's a true statement. I know that in some of the things that we received as far as the detailed itemization, it specified the staff members, and some would typically ask their staff members that question. I can't speak to public safety because they do obviously have a higher number of employees, and so I'm not sure how that process works for them. If the chiefs ask in advance of who might be using it, I don't know that. They would have to answer that for you.
Councilman Hazelton for the third time.
If the 15,000, half of the request is the concession, I noticed on this report that the fire and police department used that exclusively into that amount, 5,000 to the police department, 10,000 to the fire department. Our first responders are definitely in a critical field and always looking for the best talent. I think if we are going to continue this program, we should do it for those departments exclusively.
Any other discussion before, yes, Councilman Newman?
Thank you. I think your point, Councilman Hazelton, I mean, I think that, you know, in the comments that you've made about employee retention and those types of things, that's across the board. You know, we're not picking and choosing who we really want to retain. We need to retain everyone. One of the things I wanted to bring before the committee is, as somebody who uses tuition reimbursement in a little bit different atmosphere. Currently, if that went away, then, you know, and I was in the position to not pay for that myself, then I would be dropping out of school. So I don't know if we have any employees like that. In that position, I assume we do. But keep in mind here as we make these critical decisions that you could have an employee who could be very close to graduating or very close to obtaining some sort of post-certification through a college. And if we end this abruptly in a budget cycle, that employee may not have the ability to complete that certification or degree. So I want to remain cognizant of where we are with our teams.
For four.
With all of
Hazelton.
to Councilman Neely's point, with all the departments heads here, are you aware of any employee of which that is the case?
Could you repeat the first part of that? I'm sorry.
So Councilman Mealy stated that there are employees that may likely be relying on this program and may be close to attaining their degree. If the program was lost, they would not finish their degree. Are there any employees of any of departments that the heads are here present that are aware that that is the case, where we have an employee that is close to graduating that is reliant upon this program?
I don't know if we've looked at it from that angle to know.
I mean, I can take a shot at it. I think I said before, I'm a big proponent of the program. I'm a benefactor of the program, having gone through it myself early in my career. So I can tell you I probably would not be sitting here today if I did not have tuition reimbursement early in my career. So all of our employees are working towards a degree. There's no one that would take college level classes in our department who would not be working towards either an associate or a bachelor's or a master's. So where they're at that continuum, I can't tell you exactly. I mean, I did query our folks that were involved, but that would be the only reason for our personnel to participate in the program, is to pursue a degree of some sort.
Thank you for your input, Chief.
Any other discussion? I'm going to speak, and then I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Lester to close. So is there any other? So I've been consistent since I got elected that I believe that the government is, entire purpose is for the core function of services that a municipality, a state, a federal government, et cetera, needs. If you wake up in January and there's snow on the ground, you expect these guys to be out there all night doing the job so you can get to work. That's a core function of government. Tuition reimbursement, while nice, which I've also, like Councilman Mealy, have used at the state before it went away, and then I think it came back, is a great thing when you can afford it. The problem we have is twofold. One, we have declining revenues, as Ms. Perry denoted this morning in the Finance Committee, and two, we have a percentage of personal services that is eating up our general fund more and more and more every year, and that will not stop because of inflationary pressures on salaries, on healthcare benefits, on the cost of schooling. And so the question has been out there about whether we may or may not stop somebody in their progression towards a degree. Government budgets are and always have been, at least in Missouri, 1-year appropriations, not knowing year to year what may or may not happen. And so students that get into that have to be prepared for changes. There are multiple outlets, MOHELA, et cetera, that allow for students to take loans. I think I would better bet most of us in here at one point or another had a student loan. And so while I appreciate Councilman Lester's amendment where it includes the language that it must be used solely for the purpose of your job, I do not agree that it is a core function of business. I think decisions like these will become well more commonplace next year and the year following as we see the erosion of sales tax revenue as the large influx of federal dollars has now ended. And I believe that budgets shouldn't bet on a come. I don't think any budget, I think the single thing taxpayers ask of us is that we do not gamble with taxpayer money. And when we say, hey, it may not snow, that's a gamble because we have no clue. And so I'm going to be a no. While I appreciate Councilman Lester and bringing this forward, I'm going to be a no. And I'm going to call on Councilman Lester to close on his amendment.
So, yes, the core functions of city government for acting on and delivering on those core functions, you have to have staff. And for quality services, you have to have good staff. And as I've said, we've had some problems recruiting and retaining staff, and I think we'll continue to do that unless we stay competitive. This has been a benefit for our employees, and I just don't think it's a good idea to take away benefits from employees right now when we're struggling to retain them or to recruit staff. Yes, we need to do the job of clearing the streets of snow. And I've tried to point out that we have a good bit more in the budget this year than in previous years to accommodate that need. And I think given that we are fully stocked, and this is for then replenishing that we're in good shape, given that it's $100,000 plus, even with this reduction of $30,000, we're still in good shape for doing a great job that we always do with clearing the snow. Have those snowstorms. So anyway, I would urge council to pass this. It's important for our employees, and it's important for us to continue to retain and to in the future recruit quality employees.
Having closed on the amendment, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
A second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Having closed on the amendment, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Allers,
No.
Hazelton,
No.
Joe,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Mealy,
Aye.
Schwartz,
No.
Spencer,
No.
Spicer, Young. We have 4 ayes and 5 noes. Motion does not pass.
By your vote of 4 ayes and 5 noes, the motion has failed. I will now go to Councilman Neely for his amendment.
Thank you, Chair. So my amendment is in regard to the PPS MPO planner position, and I'll just read a little bit. I propose this amendment to bring much-needed assistance to the Planning and Protective Services Department and the Metropolitan Planning Organization teams. As staff navigate around these unfilled positions, managers are doing day-to-day work that would normally be performed by these planner positions. This is creating an environment where managers are unable to do some of the long-term planning that they typically do. On the horizon, we see a lot of planning activities, including tri-level work, high street viaduct work, transportation alternatives, program work, the river market, activity of roads, extensions of infrastructure, and MSP redevelopment. And I propose that the 200th celebration occurring next year for the city of Jefferson budget set aside in the amount of $100,000 be used in part to assist in the in filling this position and subsequent hire. I believe that staffing is one of those core functions of city government. You know, I think one of the best reasons to get this position filled as soon as possible is due to the federal match. The position with benefits is a $73,714 position. With federal match dollars, the total cost of this position to us comes down to $42,386. And when I say us, I mean the city. That's a roughly 43% savings to us on this position. To get the budget for the 200 celebration back to the $100,000 that the mayor recommended, I looked into some grants, and I think we can likely use a DE tourism. For example, the Show Me State Air Show that I know a lot of us attended just recently used one of these tourism grants, and they got quite a bit of money for their air show. It was a great thing. I also think grants like that, DED grants, are a great way to use outside funds, meaning across the state, to bring to our city for an event like this. Since the 200th celebration goes far beyond just city residents, the tourism grants would really complement the nature of the event. Through the fiscal year 2025, if grants don't get us exactly to the $100,000 or the bill for the 200 celebration exceeds $100,000, then what I might say is throughout the fiscal year 25, we could appropriate supplemental spending for this celebration once we know how much city funding will be needed for the planned activities. I know that we've all been given a document showing what we think may happen, but that'll evolve over time, and I think we'll have a better idea of how much money we need in the budget for this event. There are several situations in budget in which we pass supplemental appropriations throughout the fiscal year. This will allow us as council to give the correct funding to the mayor's 200th celebration as plans develop and costs are identified. So I thank the committee for their consideration of getting us our core functions of government complete by filling this position. Thank you.
Discussion on the amendment. Councilman Spencer.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask you a couple questions on the budgeting financing for the position?
Yes.
Just for clarification, make sure I understood, where was the dollars coming from to fund this position?
The mayor budgeted in the fiscal year 25 $100,000 for a 200th celebration for the city's 200th birthday. That would be the location.
Okay, so funding all the position if we don't get grants would come out of that.
So $100,000 is the location where the funding would come from. That takes that funding down to about $57,000. And then DED grants, I think, would be very likely to bring that number back up to 100K. We can, as a city, work aggressively on those. Otherwise, supplemental appropriations. But again, just to echo, this is a $73,000 position that we can get for $42,386.
From a grant from, again, I'm just making clarification, from DED, or is that like from Campo?
the grant to bring the funds for the 200th celebration back up to the mayor's recommended $100,000 would hopefully, in my mind, come from the Department of Economic Development Tourism grants that I have researched.
I think another opportunity would be to utilize Campo funding, but we can't go through this process this year to use Campo funds. We would need to get ahead of that curve for next year to be able to request and have a vote of support through our Campo board to possibly fund this position for next year, potentially, instead of relying on a shortfall to fund from a DED grant for a celebration. I think the celebration dollars are an easy target, if you will, to go after. But I think it has the potential of, good return on investment, good economic impact dollars to the community if we do it right. I think it'll be an investment in our community that we'll see a great return on. So I'm just reluctant on relying outside grant opportunities. We should probably go ahead and budget what we think we need to spend as a show of support to our state partners that we're committed to this celebration for our community. So,
Further discussion, Councilman Lester.
Just clarification. So you indicated that Campo, the federal part of it, wouldn't be available. Is that what you for this position?
I don't want to speak to hit on his amendment, but what I'm accustomed to is that we have a budget year, and Mr. Smith could probably clarify that, is that we've already passed our budget, and so
that's correct. And we actually, they had in there, they accounted for that additional planner position. So they had in Campo's budget basically 2 planners, senior planner and a staff planner, and then 0.3 for our planning manager. So we have the senior planner now, so then they did accommodate for 1 additional planner.
So in terms of the federal money, we could apply it this year.
Yes, we could, based on the budget that they've had.
Okay, so 42,000 is basically correct. Okay, that's all I wanted to clarify.
Mr. Chairman, can I interject? So the unified work plan for Campo has been approved. There is enough budget there to cover this position through the unified plan. However, I do want to point out that the estimations that have been provided to Councilman Mealy for this budget amendment are based on a 50-50 split, 50% for planning, 50% for MPO. It is important to remember that in order for us to charge MPO for any staff time, we have to justify the work that the planner is doing as acceptable to MPO and as for MPO. So the 50-50 split would be a best case scenario in my mind. Worst case scenario, the question becomes, is that new planner able to work on MPO projects, has time to work on MPO projects? And I do want to point out that this is a situation that I believe in the last fiscal year, maybe 2 fiscal years ago, we had a very similar problem with, where a planner was put into MPO at 100% and they did not do work for MPO. Therefore, when the fiscal year was finished, the city ended up picking up those costs because we could not submit for reimbursement from MPO the amount of planner work because it was not related to MPO. Is that fairly stated, Clint?
Yes, I think that was. I think we had our one city planner budgeted under MPO, and that wasn't obviously sustainable, so they were doing work on the city planning side, and so that could not be billed at the MPO. So we corrected that last year, so those positions are more accurately reflected in the current budget for how they're funded.
So my point, though, on this new one is that we've done it as a 50-50 split. The question becomes, can we truly split the work 50-50 so that they are actually serving 50% of their time on NPO projects. That's the only thing that I want to make sure is understood.
And to answer that question, yes, we've talked, the staff and I, and that distribution of additional work duties would be just fine with one new planner split between NPO and the city planning, so.
Councilman Michael. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, coupled with a decision like this, I often ask myself, why not? Why can't we? Why shouldn't we? But about the point about the 50-50 split and the fact that we weren't able to get full funding, as it were, due to the what was reported, was that due to not identifying the work in advance? Was it more of a manager type issue of not dotting the I's and crossing the T's and making sure that we follow it, or was it a lack of work?
It was a lack of ability, I think, for the planner that we had to work on the NPO projects. Clint may be better able to state that, but.
That budget basically moved our one planner in the NPO. So all we had was half of a planning manager working under the city budget. And that was, I think, due to a desire to try to fund all the planning activity out of the NPO, but that's not possible. So we had to have that planner do work for city planning that's required. So we have people come in, we have phone calls, we have emails, we have development review. They have to do that work, and that's not NPO work, so we couldn't bill into the NPO. So essentially, we restructured the budget after that year to move that one FTE back into the general fund. So it was something, like I said, that wasn't sustainable. And there's a certain amount of work that has to be done for the city and the city's development responsibilities.
What was sustainable, Clint? What do you mean by that?
By keeping that our current planner in the NPO. We had no planning staff that was budgeted to do current planning, city planning.
But
Mr. Smith, could you provide an example of what MPO tests are and how much the workload is for MPO tests at this moment?
So I can give you an example, I think, from our previous year. We had 4 specific work products that had to be produced. And so our MPO basically has federally required work that they have to do each and every year. Some of them not necessarily happen every year, but they're kind of staggered. This past year we did have a fair amount of things come up. We have our work program we put together every year, TIF. We had our metropolitan transportation planning plan, our active transportation plan that we put together. We also started work on the tri-level. So the thing with MPOs also is no matter how small you are, and we are one of the smallest MPOs in the state, there's a certain baseline of amount of work that has to be done. So we're essentially trying to do that with one planner with the assistance from our planning manager. And right now he was ideally budgeted about 0.3 of his time working on the MPO, but it trends a little more to 0.5 because there's too much work there for one planner to handle. So we're able to get done, I think, the core amount of work that has to be done for the NPO every year, but it does not allow us to do anything beyond that. And really the amount of work we have, especially this past year with those 4 or 5 work products that had to be done, it kind of pushed, I'd say, staff a little bit to its kind of limits. So,
Further question, Mr. Smith, if I may, Mr. Chair. To what degree does this affect the developer, the customer service end of it? Does this push back any development within our city? Does this affect them because of the workload?
No, I'd say no, because how we handle that really is ideally with the additional on the planning side, and I think this is what Councilman Mealy had suggested, is that we have rather routine work being handled by staff that could be better spent doing more complicated and complex projects. So for instance, in planning and zoning, we've been working on a set of text amendments, and that's something that is probably taking a little longer than we'd like because the staff that we have is doing these more routine things, the everyday, the current planning things. So we don't put aside the development review that needs to be done, the development meetings that we need to go to. What we set aside is the larger projects, kind of the longer term projects. And so having that additional staffing in the planning department that can do more of the routine tasks frees up some of our more experienced staff to do some of those things in the future, hopefully more and quicker.
Would an internship with a university from, I remember Webster University has a community planner program, and I believe there's a few others in the St. Louis area as well. Would perhaps a supplemental intern help as well?
It could. We had an intern last summer for several weeks, and generally they can help out with some more, again, those routine tasks. Depending on how experienced they are, they may not necessarily leave a lot of the work that needs to be done. A lot of that is us kind of showing them how the organization works and how that profession works. So it's sometimes it can actually take more time than it's really. But that's part of kind of sharing that profession as well as bringing interns in to kind of show them how that job works.
I think an intern's probably a good stopgap for now. Then next year we make sure that we allocate what we need for that planner.
Councilwoman Joe.
Yeah. I am with you on funding the core functions of government and thinking that is the top priority. So could someone articulate to me how planning a celebration is a core function of government?
I'd be more than happy to. I think there's few things historically, in my opinion, that is date certain. And, well, I'll go back. I think Monday we talked a lot about history and how important it is to people of this community. And by that history, we mean a building. Well, I think when it comes to a bicentennial celebration of the capital city, I think we're talking at least, for most of us in this room, a once-in-a-lifetime celebration of how it became that Jefferson City ended up here, or the capital city ended up here, how fortunate we all are to get to live here. And outside of you and maybe Councilman Neely, most of us aren't going to be around for the next one, 250. Sorry, Jeff, you ain't making it, but
We'll have you now for spite.
yeah, but I think you see over and over again major cities spending an exorbitant amount of money on celebrations year in and year out with regards to our independence, our founding, things like that. You watch millions of dollars being spent on New Year's of all things, which really means nothing with regards to this country, but 4th of July events and things like that. I think this is a rare moment in history. It is the seat of government, which requires government involvement, and I think because of that, it becomes a core function.
Follow-up question, so people watching or listening can understand, they may not have seen the breakdown of what all is planned with that $100,000. Could someone articulate that and how that, what the plan is and how that might relate to the historical significance?
Thank you. I'd just like to make some comments, and I appreciate the comment. What we're trying to do is create that celebration for our city. We spend far more than this on July 4th. Now, the city doesn't have to put all that in. We do go out and raise additional funds, and we've got good corporate partners in this city in addition to others. What the councilman was talking about is celebrating 200 years of the existence of this city as the capital city. I see this 100,000 as just seed money to go to the state of Missouri, to other corporate partners, to other individuals. The document that was presented was a preliminary document. It may or may not have any relevance as we move forward, depending on how many dollars we're able to generate. Things that I'm trying to look at is, when you enter Jefferson City, you don't know you're entering Jefferson City. We got little faded out green signs. I mean, I've talked to MoDOT, could we do some nice signs for the 200th anniversary? Welcome to Missouri's capital city. Do some things that we're proud of. The dollars that we invest, we're going to get back, because the better job we do of our celebration, the more people. This is not just the 44,000 of us that live here's capital city. It's 6+ million people's capital city. The more of them that want to come and celebrate, the more tax revenue we generate, the more people we put in hotels and restaurants. I mean, there's events planned depending on how good a job we do it. It is very hard, and the councilman, I hope would attest, to go to state government and say, would you help us fund this if we're not willing to fund it ourselves? I mean, we need to step up. It's one time. 200 years, $500 a year is what I'm asking for. So I can go, and I've already talked to maybe the approach chair in the Senate, we don't know, but I've already started to lay the groundwork in the Capitol that we want you guys and gals to invest in our city. But I can't go hat in hand and say, will you invest in the city if we're not going to invest in the city? That's that's what I'm trying to do to promote this city, to try to build economic development. And that was why the request. 100,000, it's a drop in the bucket if we're going to do it right. What we envision is kicking this thing off July 4th of 2025, have celebrations, and there's been discussions preliminary with the schools and other partners, a concert at the amphitheater, and then carry it on through to 2026 when our country celebrates the 250th, and then just kind of hand it over and let them do their thing. But if we're not going to do it right, we shouldn't be involved in it. And I mean, this is just a drop in the bucket to what we're going to need if we're going to do it right. So that's why the number, and the lower that number goes, the more difficult it gets to say, hey, we can't put money in, but would you invest so we can celebrate our city? 6 million plus people. This is their capital city. We're going to ask them to invest, but we have to invest first, in my opinion. So that was why the request.
Councilman Lightman. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think most of you have certainly heard me talk about economic impact, how important it is to bring visitors to our city. I get it. $100,000 is a chunk of money. It's certainly significant, but also a valid cost, right? Let me step back and say that a budget this size, and we've come down to two things that are amended. Chair, I think you and the committee and the staff owe each other a little bit of support of each other in that, because that's pretty significant to be able to grind it down to this. And there's two valid things that people have varying opinions on, which is fine. It's cool. The planner position that we identified, and I think I mentioned it in an open meeting a month or so ago, a month and a half ago or so, that at one time we had 4 and now we have 2, and we need another one. It's been identified as another one. So after I said all that, these are tough decisions, and I know you all had tough decisions in preparing your budgets and to get to this point. I just wish there was a way to squeeze the orange to where you can do both, to be honest. And I don't know how that is or where that is. And I know the chair's goal is to approve this budget next week, or come out of budget tonight and approve it as a body. Monday, or next Monday, this Monday, next Monday. But maybe there, I know we've looked at the budgets. I know y'all grinded on them. We all have to some degree, some certainly more than others. I'd hate to hamstring a committee that's welcoming our citizens to our city and to its capital, but I'd also hate to hinder the staff and not hamstring us there either. So I didn't answer with any solutions. I just had more questions. Sorry.
I remember the line item for the demolition, the 2 demolition projects that we had, and neither of those were set in stone as they're going to happen. That's just contingent on if they do happen. If they don't happen, could that money then go to the planner position, or must it travel back to the fund and be spent in a specific manner? Because I remember it's $125,000 in the demolition fund, if I remember correctly, for 2 different projects. Is that right?
Well, every position needs an appropriation. So it would clearly have to be an action that we would have to undertake as a committee to appropriate money for a position.
Is there a way to make a conditional appropriation?
No. There's no real way to say if this happens, then this. I don't think that's legal, A, and B, as the chair of the committee, I don't want conditionality on the budget. I think we need to have a final formal plan. If those plans change, if we have money, then we can maybe have that discussion through the supplemental process, but I don't want to base the budget on conditions. No way.
I'm just trying to find a way to make
I know you are,
things happen.
and I appreciate that. Councilwoman Joe.
I have 2 things, both a little different, but with that DED grant, what is the time that it would take to receive that grant, and what is the likelihood that we would actually receive it?
Well, I might help with that since I researched that. I don't know that the city's really researched that yet, but the particular tourism grant that I was looking at had awards being distributed in, I believe it was June 25. So you're looking at between now and next year. So you may get in one of those positions where you have to take out of a pot, knowing that that's going to refund a fund if something like that can happen. But, and I kind of spoke out of turn, but Chair, do you mind if I?
No.
Or, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Joe, you had another question.
Yeah, so the second part is that I also definitely support economic development, because the more people that we can have in Jefferson City, the better off we all are. This, in my eyes, while I completely agree with Councilman Leichel, is that they are both important, and I don't want to diminish either. However, for long-term economic development, for several large projects that we have coming down the pipe, for me, a planning position takes priority, because I think it's more of a long-term continued economic development rather than a short-term event. And even with Councilman Melia's amendment, there would still be money towards this event. There are opportunities that we have to seek more funding, where I think we can pull it off, and especially if we rally with a lot of our community partners and people who are in the community. And I know that all of us have various connections to all sorts of interesting people, so I tend to lean toward the long-term investment on some of these large projects that the community has rallied behind quite a bit.
I just want to make one other observation on this. Keep in mind that the $100,000 spend that was in the mayor's budget was a one-time spend. And what we are now talking about is ongoing cost on a continual basis. So just one thing to point out.
That was my comment, exactly.
That's my talking point. Appreciate that. Is there any other I'm gonna have.
Yeah, no, I'll follow up in a moment, but I did want to add something to that.
Oh, okay, yes.
So-
Councilman Milne.
So while this is a one-time expenditure, it is something that it's my understanding it's in FY '26 and beyond going to be something that is easily absorbed within the budget. It's not something that can't be absorbed in this arena in future years. And also too, you know, if the match continues to exist, which I don't know if this is a lockdown match program or how that particular grant works, or if it even is a grant. I'm fine with a grant, but so that's a lot of savings this year, and you know, with existing funds being utilized in subsequent years for the position, that could retain the position. And one thing I might point out is that, you know, positions come and go. We've got 2 vacancies right now. We're trying to get some folks some dire help. So they're not always filled positions. And you also have vacancies in the middle of employments across the city in which variations. So it's very.
I guess my question would be what you mean by this could be absorbed. Do you mean that PPS is going to be expected to reduce their budget, their current existing budget, by the $42,000 that is required to fill this position? Or do you mean that it is something we can easily add as we continue forward into the budget? And if that's what you're referring to, I guess my question would be, we are sitting here discussing $30,000 worth of tuition reimbursement on top of also now a $42,000. So if we're talking about $30,000 in tuition reimbursement, we are clearly struggling to absorb any additional costs.
And I might respond to that with, you know, we're not going to have a $100,000 party every year or celebration. And also too, my hope would be that it would be absorbed in the PPS budget and not the second option.
I think a $42,000 cut to any department budget would force that department to struggle. I could be wrong, Clint could speak for himself, but if that's the intention, I know that cutting my budget by $42,000 would create serious issues.
If Mr. Chair doesn't mind, we might ask the director of PPS the reality of that.
I think it depends. I think what Sheila's describing is if you're asking us whether we can decrease our non-salary costs next year, so take away from training and other budgets within PPS to then fund this position, yes, I would concur with that. That would be difficult. But if you're talking about just through the normal course of items that maybe weren't funded, or were funded this year but not next year to free up additional money in the general fund as a whole, that's a different question. But yeah, 42,000 goal to decrease what we're spending right now on other things within our current.
Yeah, so maybe that would be the second option, not the first.
Mr. Chairman. We'll about beat this horse to death, but
Just a follow-up though, that $42,000 of actually of a $77,000 staff position is not just the final cost. That stretches into again, additional healthcare, additional pension cost, and benefits, so
That is all inclusive.
it's all in. That is all inclusive.
It includes
Did include it.
all personnel costs. I mean,
Thank
anything
you for
that
the
was
clarification.
additional from an operating perspective, it does not take into account.
However, we only budget for healthcare cost as for employee only.
Correct.
So if it's employee plus family, then there's some additional costs. Is there any other
And-
benefits like that?
And all benefits are like that,
Yeah.
because all benefits also are based on base wage, and it's in there at the minimum of the range as well.
So if we hire employee plus family, there's some variation there.
Councilman.
I'll just second the amendment.
I just want to say one thing, just kind of repeat what I said the other day about the position, and that's, I kind of view this as on a scale of need, and really from kind of starting to be needed to critical, and I'd say we're on the lower end of that spectrum, but I think it's important to bring this up and make sure council's aware. As we move through time, we're probably going to come back in each year that it becomes more critical. We're going to make sure that's emphasized, but right now, just to be clear on that, I think we're more on the lower third of that need scale. So it's not a cliff per se. It's kind of a gradual slope of when are we going to start getting to the areas where we need that extra staff, and we're in that zone right now, I think, but not to the absolute critical top of that. So.
Sheila, you said that is the Campo piece, am I correct in saying that it is a grant?
So we split it.
grant. Okay.
50, it is a grant. We split 50% for planning and 50% for Campo. Of that 50% for Campo, there are 80% of those funds that are federal funds. And of the remaining 20%, the city covers 75% of that, and the county covers the other 25% of the 20. Is everyone following? So there is grant money there on the federal, and then also some funds from the county as well.
And I guess my point on this is, well, in response to Councilwoman Jobe about the necessity or core function of government, I think I've spoken to that, so I won't go through that again. But when you start appropriating long-term positions and ongoing funding with grants, I think you wade into dangerous territory. And we have no idea. Here we are in almost October. We have no idea who the president's going to be. We have no idea what's going to happen to the federal budget. We have no idea if these grants are going to be around. They may be around forever. They may not. We don't know. And so I think that it's a delicate situation, because if that grant, we know the hardest thing to get rid of is a government program once established. And I think when you have a position and you have a live, warm body in that position and a grant goes away, well, then you got to find a way to keep that person employed, because the last thing you want to do is put them on the street. And so because of that, because I think the historical aspect of this appropriation, especially the fact that it's one time, the amount of revenue it will generate for this community, coupled with our partners on the private and state side, I'm going to be a significant no on this one. And I'll go to Councilman Neely to close.
In closing, I would just say that, I think it's important. I don't suspect this will pass tonight, so I think it's important to make a couple of comments. And those are, I think we staff our organization before we fund celebrations. I think that is maybe the core kind of, in my mind, conservative method of government is to fund what we need and then to have available additional funds for the wants. What we need is what we need, and then what we want is what we want. Now, I appreciate staff explaining that sometimes levels become critical for staff, sometimes they're not quite there yet. But in my experience, actually in planning, when you get to critical points, you lose things. You lose opportunities. They've already passed you, you can't catch up. And I think it's very important to plan for the future. Planning for the future involves when you start to see that pendulum come up, you're identifying that, and you make a plan of action for how to keep that pendulum steady or on a transition back down. And I think it's so important for morale too in our city to have appropriate workforces, that folks are not overworked, and that we, as a result, see people going to other organizations, whether it be public or private, where the morale is much different and there's a level of work that's not overbearing to somebody, whether they be single with a family, whatever. So I'll probably just leave it at that. I came through the 24 budget cycle with a lot of folks, and one thing that I consistently heard was next year. Back in 24, next year we were going to do a grants coordinator. We were going to acquire more grants for the community. I'm sitting here a year later. So I just want to put on everybody's mind the importance of not pushing something to next year and making a plan today. Thank you.
With that, we will go to a roll call. Madam Clerk.
Allers?
No.
Hazelton?
No.
Joe?
Am I allowed to explain my vote? I feel it's necessary.
Well, you kind of already did, I think.
Well, being that there is no,
Councilwoman, we just need a vote. I'm sorry.
well, I'll write it out for the fans later. No.
Lester?
Aye.
Michael?
No.
Neely?
No.
Schwartz?
No.
Spencer?
No.
Spicer?
No.
Young? 7 noes, 2 ayes.
By your vote of 2 ayes and 7 noes, your motion has failed. With that, I'm going to open the floor for any final words of criticism or otherwise. Seeing none, Councilman Spencer.
Well, it's not criticism. I would just like to make a motion that we move this budget to the full council on its appropriate schedule.
Second. The motion is second. Discussion. Councilman Joe.
well, I would like to explain my vote, being that you articulated that there is no ongoing funding for this, and I agree that funding with a grant is a little tricky. I also agree with Councilman Mealy's statements that for next year, I would like to earmark that we fund that before it reaches a critical point and people are stressed out, because it makes it hard to do what we're supposed to do as the government. So I would really like to see that prioritized next year and identifying funding for that.
And Councilman Job, you also have my support in that.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor to do pass the budget to the entire entire council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Allers.
Aye.
Hazelton.
Aye.
Job.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Michael.
Aye.
Mealy.
Aye.
Schwartz.
Aye.
Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer.
Aye.
Young. Motion passes.
With that, again, thank you all. To staff, a little round of applause for you all. All of you all, making a budget's the toughest thing we do in government. There's no doubt about it. It's only going to get harder. Thanks to the council, thanks to the clerk. And with that, I'll accept the motion to
Jerry, second.
adjourn in a second. Madam Clerk.
All in favor?
Aye.